Hello friends, my name is Bintou and welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, we're going to get into my August wrap up. Now I'm filming this a little prematurely because it's August 22nd, so we're not quite at the end of August, but I'll just hop in at the end of this video with an update at the end of the month before this goes live. So far this month, I've fully read 14 books. I'm currently in the middle of 2 books and one that I'm confident that I'm gonna finish. Actually, both of them I should finish. One of them is just a re-listen to The Way of Kings. I'm still in the middle of working my way through that. It's been very slow going, just because I've been pretty idle and I have a hard time listening to audiobooks when I'm very idle. But let's get into some of my favorite books that I've read so far this month. So first book I want to talk about is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. Now, this is my first ever Toni Morrison book that I've read. And when I reached the end of this book, I was so desperate to talk to someone about it, but I was also speechless. I didn't have the words to talk about this book. It was just amazing. And this was a definite 5-star read. And the premise behind this book is that we're following this young girl, Pacola, and she believes that she is ugly. And she thinks that the way that she'll become beautiful is to have blue eyes. So she prays and prays and hopes and wishes for her eyes to become blue. And then she believes that she will be beautiful. So that's the general premise. Now, this story is not pleasant. It is just tragedy after tragedy, really befalling almost everyone in the book, including the little girls that most of the story is told from their perspective, and the adults in the novel, so the parents of these young girls. However, it was so beautifully written, and it's a commentary on racism and how it can affect the psyche of young girls and what happens to these girls if they don't grow out of it. I think that the author's note for this book is so important to read, and I actually accidentally read it both at the beginning and at the end, because I think it came at the beginning of the ebook but at the end of the audiobook, something like that. And I actually am so glad that happened, because reading it before the story informs the story, and reading it after the story, it kind of helps you reflect on what you've just read, especially because if you're like me, you'll get to the end and then you'll just be like, how do you even make sense of what you've just read? Massive trigger warning. There will be parts of this book that will make you extremely uncomfortable, because there is like a sexual assault or multiple sexual assaults that occur in this book. So if that is something that you don't want to read, then you need to be aware that that happens in this book. However, other than that, it's something that I would highly recommend, and I already have picked up another Toni Morrison book, and I'm definitely going to make my way through her work because it was so good. All right, next set of favorites were Helen Wong's book. So I went on a contemporary romance binge because I got a stack of them from my library, but of the stack or of the books that I read, these 2 are my favorite. I'd never read anything by her, but at this point I will pick up everything she writes like immediately. I know there's a 3rd book that's slated to come out, I think next year, which is so sad because I don't want to wait that long to hear Kwan's story. But both of these books were great. I read The Bride Test first, and this follows Kai and Esme. Kai is on the spectrum, and his mom finds a girl from Vietnam to come and become his wife. And so she's navigating his eccentricities while she's also fighting for her own daughter and trying to become someone in this new country that she has immigrated to. And so she's here in the United States for summer, and by the end of the summer, she and Kai need to decide whether they're going to get married. This was fantastic. I think that Helen Wong just writes characters well, because the characters in both of these books, I love them so much. In this first book, we follow Stella and Michael, and the relation between the 2 is that Michael is Kai's cousin. So Michael is a male escort that Stella hires because, what was the reason? I think it was she just wanted to become better at sex. And he eventually signs on to do that for her because he doesn't want her to fall prey to other random, psychopaths. And of course, eventually they're going to develop feelings for each other and have to decide whether they are a right fit for one another. I think that one thing in both of these books, the one thing that I didn't like is sometimes the storyline felt like it was a little dragged. It's like this one issue that either character has, and they're like, how do I bring this up? And it goes on and on until the end. I would say that's the one con, but it wasn't bad enough that it took away from the enjoyment of the book and the characters. So these were great. And I would say that if you are looking to get into contemporary romances, then these would be a good place to start. I think the other popular set of books are the Brown sisters, Chloe Brown and Dani Brown, I think the other one is. I haven't read those yet, but they're on my list because they are also as highly touted on BookTube as these two are. Next, we have March by John Lewis. So this is book 1 of the graphic novel adaptation of his life. And this was really, really amazing. Another 5-star read. So in this book, we're following his early life. And so the other books get into his later life. And in this first book, we learn about his early childhood, the farm that he grew up on, his job taking care of the chickens on that farm, and his early love for education and wanting to become a preacher. And this book gets all the way up onto his early life in college and the sit-ins that he was a part of. This book is very well written, very well illustrated. This is also my first ever graphic novel that I've read, so I guess I don't have much experience on that, but I can say that I really enjoyed it. And because of this, I'm gonna pick up more graphic novels in the future. And I already have book 2. By the end of this month, hopefully I will have read it. We'll see. And then the next book is Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, Intimate Histories of Riotous Black Girls, Troublesome Women, and Queer Radicals by Sadiya Hartman. So currently I'm in the middle of this book, but I'm definitely going to finish it soon. But I can already predict that this is going to be a 5-star read. So this book follows the lives of young Black women in New York and Philadelphia at the beginning of the 20th century. So this is when a lot of young Black people were migrating out of the South to the North looking for opportunities for work. And it focuses on the story of the intimate lives of these young women. And I think what I like most about this book is the perspective that she provides. It's very different from the main perspective that is told and taught to us in school or on TV. And specifically the focus on how these young women were expressing their freedom as they were confined in society. So they were limited by the jobs that they could have and the success that they could obtain. And so how do they express their freedom in this kind of society? And so she looks at that from the perspective of their intimate lives. So their family lives, their sexual lives, and how all of this is a direct result of slavery. Really, really enjoying this so far. Looking forward to wrapping this up. So those are my 5-star reads so far. And then other books that I read, so this is the rest of the contemporary romance stack that I got from my library. Red, White, and Royal Blue. I believe I gave this 3 stars. I thought it was a good book. Generally a fun, enjoyable read, which is what I love this genre for anyway. And so it follows 2 young men. Alex is F. Sotis, is what he's called, the first son of the United States. His mom is like the first female president of the United States, and he is half Mexican as well. And then the Prince of Wales. I think that's what he is, the Prince of Wales. Anyway, they start off as enemies and they are asked to come together and become friends for the press, except they actually do become real life friends and eventually develop a romance. I generally like the characters in this book, and it was really fun to read and watch their relationship develop. I think that the main leads, I feel like the author could have made me care about them just a little bit more. And that's why I gave this 3 stars. It wasn't like a huge 5-star read, but still really good. So if you are looking forward to picking this up, then definitely do so. I would say The Friend Zone was my second favorite of the stack. It was the last one that I read for some reason. Oh wait, it's because I didn't have the audiobook, so I just read this alone. So the main character in this book, Kristen, she's super fun. I really like her. So she's actually struggling with fibroids in her uterus, and so she has these super painful periods, and she's planning on having surgery to have her uterus removed. She's planning her best friend's wedding, and one of the groomsmen, or he might be the best man actually, he moves into their city and he's helping her out on the side, and he's also a fireman. And so the book kind of follows the romantic relationship that they develop, as well as there's like the added element of her infertility. So I really enjoyed this book for that reason. I like when the contemporary romances throw nuance in there. I think that's why I like this one, as well as the Bride Test and the Kiss Quotient. I feel like there's just this extra element It's not like pure romance, but it's still light and fun at the same time for the most part. The Bromance Book Club. It's a book club of bros. So they get together and read historical romance books in order to try to fix the problems in their marriage. I think I gave this one 3 stars as well. Again, I thought this was perfectly enjoyable. I liked the main character, although in the beginning he's a little bit arrogant, which is what landed him in trouble in the first place anyway. But you can really see him make an effort throughout the book, and so he becomes a little bit more endearing to the reader. She has other books, and I think that I will eventually pick them up because I did enjoy this one. And then Love Her or Lose Her follows a married couple where the wife decides to separate from her husband because he is no longer the man that she fell in love with. And of course, that causes him to realize that he needs to step up. And in order to give him a second chance, she decides that they need to go see a marriage counselor. And so she picks out this super hippie marriage counselor that they start going to. And he makes them complete a bunch of homework assignments over the course of the book. Overall, I really like the characters. I think this one was a 4-star read. I think, so just like one of the other books, there's like a secret that one of the main characters has. And throughout the book, he's trying to figure out how to tell her. It wasn't even that huge of a secret. So I feel like it was like this whole big deal over nothing. That would be my least favorite part of this book. And it just kept coming up and up and up. But I liked Rosie, the female lead in this book. She's trying to open up a restaurant, and food is actually pretty central to this book. Maybe that's why I liked it so much, because there's a lot of food in here. Venezuelan food too that I was unfamiliar with, but like did a lot of research on. So overall, another fun, enjoyable read. So far, I've also read A Woman Is No Man by Heartathon. And the reason I picked this book up is because when I did my video on 5 books that changed my life, this book was left in the comments, and I'm slowly making my way through some of the books that were left in the comment section of that video, and this is one of them. And I really did like this book. I think I gave it more 4.5 stars. And the reason that it wasn't a fully 5-star read is, and this probably has to do with the fact that this was a debut novel for this author. It felt like a lot of, you know, the phrase show don't tell. I feel like she did a lot of telling in addition to the showing, but like maybe a little too much telling, because the main point of this book is that the women in this culture that she is growing up in have very little freedom, and it all boils down to the fact that they are women. So they're only seen for, or their only worth really is their ability to be good wives and good mothers and have lots of babies, really though mostly sons. I really liked the character. So it's told from the perspective of 3 women. The first woman who immigrates to the United States, and then her daughter as an adult. So there's also 2 different time periods here. And it was just really important to see how the mistakes of one generation were getting repeated, but how those young women were trying to fight against that happening again. Book was maybe just a little bit too long, but overall a really good read. I'm glad that I picked this up. So I'm glad that this was recommended. I also read 2 Riley Sager books, Lock Every Door and Home Before Dark. I also read another thriller, The Escape Room by Megan Golden, and she, I think, recently has a new book, The Night Shift, which I'm waiting to get a copy of, and I'm gonna read that. Between the 2, I think I like Megan Golden's book over Riley Sager's book. I will say, to Riley Sager's credit, that for the first book, I knew who the bad guy was going to be about halfway through the book, but I didn't predict the way that the book ended. However, I feel like he used that trope where, like, when you're watching a scary movie and all point sign to just get up and leave, and the main character just ignores all of it. Like, they have like no sense and no logic. I hate reading that kind of trope in a thriller book, and I feel like that came up in this book, actually in both of them. And maybe that's why I didn't enjoy them as much as I enjoyed The Escape Room, because The Escape Room was more of a revenge story. This girl's like trying to exact revenge on her old coworkers for some of the terrible things that they do, and they aren't great people. And if you're reading the book, you're not gonna like them, and you're not supposed to like them. But yeah, for that reason, I think I enjoyed the revenge story a little bit more than the scary house stories where the characters are all defying logic for some odd reason. Next, we have Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed. I did not like this book, so I gave it 2 stars. And I almost DNF'd it, but in the end, I just chugged on and finished it because it wasn't like a super long book. But I was still so confused as to what the point of this book was when I got to the end. And I understand that this is probably a rather unpopular opinion because a lot of people really loved this book. And that's probably why I didn't give it 1 star, because I know that a lot of people loved it. I just didn't. I did find there were a handful of reviews that agreed with me, but yeah, I just don't think that the author did a very good job of helping me figure out what the point of the story was. It just wasn't clear to me. And I didn't really like any of the characters, including the main character. On top of that, the dialogue was not great. And I think I also had the audiobook while I was reading it, and the voice of the young baby was just, it was terrible. It was like grating on my ears. Which made it even worse. So I don't know. I just did not like this one. All right, guys, I am back. It is August 31st, officially the end of the month, and I only added about 1 more book to my list this month, and that is Beloved. So I finished reading Beloved by Toni Morrison, and I give this somewhere between 3 and 4 stars. I thought that it was okay. I didn't like it as much as I liked The Bluest Eye, but it was still pretty good, and I would feel pretty good recommending this to people. So Beloved, actually, it's a story that involves a ghost and like a haunted house, which I didn't know this was what it was going to be about going into it. I didn't know anything about it. I liked so the story centers mostly on these 3 female characters: a mother, Setha, her daughter, Denver, and then this girl, Beloved, who kind of just shows up out of nowhere. And the commentary I suppose the story is trying to do is Setha has to make this really tough decision, and she's trying to justify it to herself as to whether or not it was right, and seeking forgiveness from like the one person who can forgive her for it. And I guess as a reader, you also have to make that decision. Like, did what she do was right? And whether you think it's right or not, you can kind of understand where she was coming from. And it all relates to how the experience and fear of slavery drove her to do things that were perhaps unfathomable. The book was a little slow going toward the middle, and then it really picked up in like the last 50 pages. And that's when I like finally wanted to get through it and figure out what was going to happen at the end. I feel like at times, because her writing style is so poetic, it felt vague to me, and I didn't quite understand what was going on. Overall, I get like the general big picture of the book, but just keep in mind that with Toni Morrison's writing, sometimes it may be confusing what is going on in the story. And then I forgot to mention this earlier, but for Heartathon, I'm also including my Heartathon wrap up here. I was supposed to read I Am Malala, but I couldn't get a hold of it from my library, so I wasn't able to read that particular book for Heartathon. But the 2 books that I'm counting toward Heartathon are The March by John Lewis and Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments by Saidiya Hartman. Both of those books feature a person or multiple people who demonstrate some sort of heroism or courage. Mostly it happens to be resistance, I would say, for them. There is an educational piece in John Lewis's book, but for Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, that was mostly resistance against a society and a culture that was working entirely against the women that were featured in that book. And then some final mentions. I forgot to mention these books when I started filming earlier. I read Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston, and I vlogged about that, as well as Make Time. Make Time was super enjoyable. I had been meaning to implement some of the things that I learned from that book into my daily life, and I think I tried for like a couple of days and then kind of forgot about it, but I need to get back to it because it's not like a huge stretch for me. Like, I already have a planner which has like a focus for the day that I have for every single day. I just don't ever use it, and that's kind of in line with the highlight that they talk about, the highlight of the day. As for distractions, I'm not very good at avoiding them, and I really need to get better because I have so much work to catch up on that messing around on the internet is just not helpful whatsoever. It's taking me hours to do tasks that shouldn't take me nearly that long. And as for Their Eyes Were Watching God, I thought that was a perfectly enjoyable book. I think I said it was 3 stars, somewhere between 3 or 4. I like the setup of that story because it's like this girl, she shows up in a town that she had left, and everyone's like gossiping, trying to figure out, well, what happened? Why did she come back alone? And she sits down on the porch and she's telling a friend from the town her entire life story. And so you learn about her early life, where her grandmother married her off super young to a man that she didn't love and never was able to grow to love. And then she takes off and meets a new guy, and they live in this new town. where he plays a really critical role, but that forces her to take a very submissive role. And she's not able to be herself, and it ends with another guy. So it's like a series of relationships basically, but you learn more about her through the course of these relationships, and by the end you kind of see her grow into a real person and take a little bit more agency for herself. And I think that's it. Those are all of the books that I read for the month of August. Overall, August was a pretty good month. I read a lot of great books. I read more in the first half of the month, and then the second, like this last week of August, has just been super hectic, so I haven't been able to read nearly as much as I normally do. Let me know in the comments below some of your favorite books for the month of August. And if you participated in Heartathon, let me know some of the books that you read for Heartathon. In the meantime, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.